He has over 15 years of experience through both military and civilian service. He began his IT career at the age of 13, assisting companies with executable security, protecting applications from attacks such as DLL injection, and writing ASM through C to be injected to manually fix unique attack vectors. He served in the U.S. Marine Corps from 2012 to 2017 and has held roles from analyst to VP throughout his career. He has created many cybersecurity programs from scratch for major corporations. He was selected by the largest satellite and space magazine called Be a Satellite as one of the rising stars under 35 in his industry. He is currently the Florida ambassador for Blacks in Cybersecurity, so thank you for all you do for this community. Today we will be sharing insights on the transparency algorithm, also called TAA or TTA, which stands at the forefront of a new era in legal technology, combining AI innovation with sincere dedication to social equality. As a comprehensive framework for addressing judicial bias, TTA enhances the fairness and transparency of legal processes and catalyzes meaningful social change. By bridging the gap between data and social justice, TTA embodies the principles of equity and accountability, paving the way for a more just and equitable legal system. Please join me in welcoming Aquarious Workman.
Hello, everybody. So today we're going to end this on a very fun, non-technical talk, right? So everything we're going to talk about today is theoretical, has not been done. Today we're going to talk about the transparency algorithm, right? So the transparency algorithm is an algorithm that is implemented through AI, back-end machine learning, and front-end mathematical equations to hold our legal system accountable for their choices and their judgments issued out to the people of America. To begin with, the grim reality of our justice system today, right? The American system is failing us. Not just one community, but many of communities, right? Historically, multiple communities have been marginalized. They've been subjected to systemic biases throughout history, and the choice of your race is not your choice, right? So it is not fair for the legal system to change based on your sex, race, or religion, right? Imagine a system where your fate is sealed not by the color of your skin, but by your character and race. This is where we are today. The system is heavily manipulated. The system is heavily biased. Who you are, who you choose to be, who you act and want to be, the race that you are given heavily influences, in a majority of counties, your legal decisions that are made authoritatively over you. Right? We must confront this grim reality and demand change. Historically, the only people who get change, who are negatively affected by a current state or incident, are those who push for change. The biases in the legal system, as we all know, are very deep-rooted. There are sentencing disparities, biased jury selections. The scales of justice are not tipped in the favor of minorities. And you have to keep in mind, right, these biases aren't just numbers and mathematical equations and data to be ingested. These are real people's lives. These are individuals who are suffering. These are mom and dads, sons and sisters who have been negatively impacted and are experiencing this negative impact of our current justice system. We have to expose and dismantle this systematic injustice. It's our moral duty. So, as we're all aware, our legal system is built on a history of inequality. You have the Dred Scott decision of 1857, where African Americans could not be considered American citizens. You have Jim Crow laws, enforce racial segregation. And then you have the FHA in 1934 who decided to architect and support the creation of redlining. These injustices are not just relics of the past, right? Like, it's very hard to rid something that is systematically wrong or unfair and then get rid of every single person who was involved with the creation of that decision. That just does not happen, right? It still presents, it still stays, and the individuals who help support that decision still have influence the majority of time in one way or another. And only by acknowledging this can we build a future of change. So this slide I left purposely blank, and for a very specific reason. Regardless of race, color, sex, can everybody here raise their hand if they know or know of, either personally or indirectly, someone who has been negatively affected by improper judicial sentences or summonings? If you look around the room, that is the issue. It's not just one race. It's not just one group. It's not just one marginalized community. It is a multitude of Americans in different groups, different sects, different communities who are being impacted by the inequality of the legal and justice system. The transparency algorithm, completely theoretical, is a beacon of hope, right? It is shining a light mathematically using data on the injustices of our current legal and justice system, right? The whole point is it will provide clear-cut, data-based analysis. We all understand in today's world, especially in the IT and cyber world, a company or product driven by accurate data is the superior company or product. And we should not leave that at just companies and products. We should implement this when we are auditing and challenging not only our legal, but also our political system. This is more than a tool. This is a catalyst for change. So what the TSA does, CTSA, right? Not the people at the airport. I was sitting there and I was like, oh man, maybe I should just say TS algorithm, because this really looks like I'm saying the TSA is doing something. So what the TS algorithm does, right, it meticulously analyzes the public and judicial court data. It takes that information and it ingests it to help identify bias statistically. And the biggest part is it takes this information and, using very nice UI UX, displays it in a way that the informed public can ingest and understand. It takes everything it used, every single detail, data point, documentation, and it saves it. So that in everything that it analyzes, there is always a body of evidence for you to go back to audit this system. Everything's cache. The algorithm is designed to detect and display the patterns of bias, right? So when it comes to the statistical part, there is no AI statistical analysis, right? Like, we can do statistical analysis with formulas that we're all aware of in different ways in the math field, different formulas and things that exist. The AI part is used for the extraction of data and the interpretation of what it thinks is happening based on that data that it extracted. Right? There's no AI for the central display either. You always need a good UI UX person to make a central display. And once again, right, these patterns that it would show, they're not just statistics. Every individual anomaly is a person who is suffering or has suffered. Shining the light on the injustice, right? One of the big catalyst for the theoretical creation of this algorithm is the fact that it has taken journalists years to come to these conclusions on a single judge or a single body of the judicial system. They then publish those results, they make it publicly available, and it hits the news for all of 5 minutes, and then it disappears in a week or two, right? It shouldn't take that much work to unveil a single corrupt body. It's too much time, too much effort in the world of AI and data analysis, right? We make the AI results publicly accessible. Not only does this identify and foster a community who can keep their legal system in check, but it also does the opposite. It allows our legal system to audit themselves. It allows our legal leading authorities to say, hey, you all thought that Judge A was extremely biased on community B and C. Instead of us having to take our time and resources to do the research to prove he's not, here is all of the statistical data and back-end saved documentation that shows that this person is indeed very unbiased in their decisions. We have to hold our legal system accountable, right? Without transparency, there can be no trust from both sides. Unless we have clear-cut, non-biased, evidence and data-backed display of where our current justice system is sitting with their mass decisions that they are making every day, no one can trust anyone. This is purely about creating a justice system that works for everyone. Not one race, not one group, not one age group, everyone. Something that identifies and helps with the mass bias in every marginalized group that has ever been negatively affected by judicial bias. We must empower equitable decisions. Judges, legal practitioners, and policymakers can also use the TS algorithm, right? Like, it's not just the public who has to use this to identify corruption. A legal practitioner will be able to say, well, I am fighting this case against said judge, and my prior client was issued said sentencing. I now have documentation to go back to my prior client and show that there was extreme judicial bias against their race or their group or their sect, and now I'm able to help get one of my clients out of prison because I was given the statistical analysis, the data, and the evidence. It allows more equitable decisions. There's a high chance that if a judge knows that everything they're doing is being logged, documented, and displayed, that they will try their hardest not to be biased so that the whole public can see, right? It's time to embrace data-driven decisions. We embrace it in every other part of the world. We understand that everywhere else, data is king. Why not do that for our legal and political system? From vision to reality. The visual AI for the ingestion is what is used on the first part of the AI, right? The AI system goes out, it will pull different records publicly available based on sites that it is trained to skim and scrape based on the information it wants to pull on said county or said judge or said group of legal professionals. It will pull that down, pull data out of the images and the documentations that it's able to grab, and then there will be a non-AI based statistical analysis. Now, this statistical analysis will have no AI, no ML backend. It is purely predetermined mathematical formulas that can be used based on the race used in each sentencing, the sentencing date, the sentencing outcome, etc., right? The amount of time a person's been sentenced, the community that they're from, based on other publicly available data from those people who have been sentenced. And then the AI will come back in, a separate ML back-end body, will conduct an analysis based on all of the data, all of the evidence, and make its own viewpoint on why it thinks said judge or said legal professional were making those decisions and how it affected each community. Then we have a really nice, really fancy UI, UX guy come and make it really pretty on the front end. It will record, as stated before, every document, every body of evidence, and every statistical formula used to come to its decision. It will record it all in a body of evidence that everyone can use as proof for the bias. And then also, the legal and justice system can use, right? Hey, we went through your body of evidence. A, B, and C is wrong. Can you please update that and change it? Well, okay, we were wrong. There is no system that is 100% right, but it allows each parties to audit each other. This, once again, is a theoretical talk. So this is a theoretical story on how the TS algorithm could bring impact and success and change in the world from its integration. Mrs. Jessica had a Hispanic son in a well-known, low economic, and high crime neighborhood. Her son, who was convicted of trespassing, was given the maximum sentence. 1 week later, the TS algorithm was released that proved Judge Rick and Judge Morty, the judges who oversaw the case, were exceptionally unlawful and biased, not just against Hispanic individuals, but people from the said area for the same crimes versus the offenders of a race who were the same as the two judges. Mrs. Jessica was able to use this data to get her son released and the two judges removed from their public seats. These success stories are the stories that the TS algorithm looks to create.
That's a fantasy, right? Like
Complete fantasy. There's complete fantasy.
Just along that same line, just to let you know, I work for the administrative offices of the U.S. federal courts, particularly data processing and data that goes through the courts. And one of the things I'm curious about is when you do an analysis after the case, if it's not a legal argument, that's not going to overturn the case. You have an appeals process which is very specific, but just because you're showing statistics, that won't overturn the case.
Yes, and 100% what was said there was true. I actually had a gentleman who talked to me before the issuing of this talk. The point of the display of the algorithm is the power that is invested in the public, right? So we've seen that with major court cases. The public is so in tune and so head over heels and so integrated into the case where it is almost obvious that the effect of the case had direct correlation to the public entity and the public's thoughts and emotions on that case. So while legally there is an official process, the hope is that this algorithm would start off inciting the public and maybe 5, 10, 15 years down the road when it's been proven out, right? Because in the judicial system, you guys aren't just going to randomly trust some algorithm that pops up overnight. You're going to have to audit it. You're going to have to review it. You're going to have to prove it out. And when it's proved out, it could be integrated into our legal system in such a way to where not only can we stop bias, we can identify bias, and individuals in your field can go one-on-one to these different judicial officials and say, hey, this says this, this, and this. And by the way, I'm in IT and I'm a data guy. Why is this the case? And then maybe the person will have a good argument, maybe they won't. It's really a tool for the public and people like yourself.
But actually, you know how the federal government cannot do research on the impact of guns in society? Same thing with the federal court. In the federal
What?
they are not allowed to do that type of analysis on judges.
Really? That's new to me. I didn't even.
Private organizations have done it already. They are large law firms who know biases all the way down to the types of words that organizations use as private but not at the government level. Now, how that changes, I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but I do know, just like we can't study the impact of guns on society at the federal level, same thing with judges. We cannot take the data that we have and study the judges.
So that is extremely interesting. So if something like this did come to fruition, would you guys also legally not be able to take this data displayed and use it in any way, shape, or form?
Like I said, we cannot do an evaluation on the judges based on that, on the data. Like I don't understand how all that works, but it's very similar to how at the federal level, they can't study the impact of guns on society, right? I don't know why that is, so I haven't done enough on that, but it's along that same line.
I didn't hear any of that. I don't know what you're talking about. No, but that's very interesting.
So you were saying that maybe it would be a statistical argument that would overturn the case, but it might not have to be a statistical argument. It could be a legal argument. Because you can get language models if you give them. So if you ask, I can't remember the page, okay, but it's very popular. You give them a question, right, on the word problem, and then you can answer, right? But if you give it the word problem, and before that you give it several word problems, and you explain the answers, explain why it did it, how it did each step, then if you give it the word problem, it'll explain the steps. It'll be like, oh, because this is the case, this is true, and because this is true, this is true. And so that way you could say, like if it could give it, like law, say, oh, the legal precedent in this says this, maybe it'll give you reason. That you could, there's a name for this, and I'm blanking on the name.
I don't remember the name. I was just going to raise, I have two things to raise. One is, the recent Chevron case is an interesting case, and I think some people think it's going to work for some things, but I almost wonder if the Chevron case, right, didn't set the precedent for evaluating something along the lines of what you're discussing here, because more likely than not, I don't know where this started, but I'm going to guess it's administrative law, right? Chevron is now going to be deferring that back to the courts to address, right? So the courts are going to have more deference when it comes to issues exactly like what you're addressing because of the recent Chevron case, one. And two, I think it is, it's hypothetical, but it's useful because then it does start to create transparency in the public. And the public is what influences the appointment of judges, and in some districts, the election of judges as well. That the more transparency and data that there is in these different areas, while it may not overturn a case for Ms. Jessica, it is certainly going to start to tip the scale in the direction of creating transparency and the understanding, right, around this for people who are committed to change and who are committed to pushing these issues.
I love it. I'm going to add that into my slide next time.
It gets popular, I don't think it start being the basis for the thing. Just be like, the algorithm says this is the sentence that can probably be given. If you're going to give more, what's your justification? Like you could put it in before it even gets to the sentencing point. Just the data says this crime on average should be 1 year. What's your recommendation? If it's higher or lower than the recommendation, what's your justification for it?
I love it. I love the thought going on. I love the patterns. It helps. This is the community involvement that I'm talking about.
That basically is mandatory minimum sentencing laws, which are described as inherently biased and has been inherently biased for years. So once we start moving towards these models that are supposed to be unbiased because they're meant to be objective, they are inherently going to always be biased because they are coming from a system that is inherently biased. Like, that sounds great. That is literally how we got to mandatory minimum sentencing.
Amazing. This is great. This is what I meant on the slide by the community must come together. It is these unique ideals, the theoretical product, things I didn't even think about that help foster a stronger product, a stronger way to hold our legal system accountable. And this is phenomenal. If you want to see the abstract and all that stuff, you can scan the QR. It's on there.
There's two things. I think the first is I'd be curious to see, besides, racial bias is obviously really important to address, but I remember reading something about how judges tend to be much more lenient right after lunch, right? If your case is heard right after lunch, they're much more likely to give you a light sentence compared to right before lunch at the end of the day or first thing in the morning or whatever. So I'd be curious to see if we could also pick up on things like that.
100%, because the data would be there from the time of sentencing, and all it takes is another non-AI mathematical equation to do that analysis. So yeah, definitely.
And the other thing I was going to say is when it comes to the UI UX part of it, I think it'd be very interesting to be able to have something like a Tableau dashboard where you have an information visualization. It's not just some flat statement that like this judge was, biased X way against white people, but if people could play around with the data and say, oh, well, show me the cases in this year, show me the cases involving these characteristics, and to be able to tweak it and view that, I think that'd be a really powerful tool.
100%, and make it to where you can drill down, right? Like show me the judges in all of this district. Show me the individuals in all of this state. Show me exactly Judge Rick and Morty, right? Like show me their biases over the last 6 months. Show me their biases over the last 2 months. I think that would be phenomenal. I suck at UI UX, so I just put UI UX there. But no, I 100% agree with you. I guess you first.
Different jurisdiction, but do you have all this data? Because in Germany we don't have this, not all those decisions are really public.
So, yes and no, right? If you can help me out here, I think like what, 60% of cases?
The judge can determine what's made available.
This is getting really shady.
The judge can determine what's made available.
They can seal cases.
Yeah.
So not everything is available. The goal is, if this does a good enough analysis, that there could be an integration that is pushed by the public and by the legal authoritative figures where, hey, you can't reference these and give the bodies of evidence, but you can tell them what to submit a public documentation request to try to get if they want to see it.
Because then you just have the data of the public available stuff.
Correct. But some data is better than no data.
Yeah, but if I'm the judge and say, well, this would be better if I make this public, and there's something I would rather not want to have this public, so I can create my own bias.
But that also raises another metric. You could have gap analysis, right? So this judge seals X amount of cases per day, right? And then if this is information, public information with respect to how you can address the issue, if you have some concerns with respect to the amount that is unpublished, data unavailable, because I think that also feeds into justice gap.
And then also you'll be able to leave comments under each person, right? Like that'll be integrated. Like, hey, I know it says that this judge is not biased at all, but like he's only revealed 3 of his cases and he's sealed like 2,000. And it'll be like, okay, well that's strange. There'll be a strange little meter, right? Like, hey, this is weird. He shouldn't be sealing this many, and a lot of people don't like him. But I 100% agree with you, right? The only way that this reaches the point to where it is extremely accurate and most usable is when we get integration to review every record. Luckily here in the US, there's a large portion of court cases, like a very large portion that are publicly available because that's one of the mandates, right? You have to go through special approval to get a case sealed. But 100%, right? And the way that you could maybe integrate it and the place that you're from is taking this as an example once it's created and pushing for social change to maybe force your legal system to allow API pools and commands so that you may not be able to link to the bodies of evidence, but you can still pull the statistical and data-based analysis and at least give that view to the public. But I'm not sure how it works there.
I just have a question. The engineer in me is getting way too into the weeds of like how you would start doing this, what things you take into account, but is it even like, and I don't know enough about law, so maybe you guys can help me out, but like, are the crimes specific enough that you can actually do a meaningful analysis? Or they're like generally broad crimes that range from like, where one crime could have extremes on the behaviors where it's really not fair to compare the two because, you could look at, the race, the age, the gender, but then you look at like the evidence and the impact and obviously they're widely different.
So that is what the algorithm hopes to push change for as well, right? So one, luckily we have charge codes, right? You get a DUI, you get a specific code. You get a DWI, you get a specific code, right? You get assault on a law enforcement officer, you get a specific code. The way to make that better is once these, and it's kind of like an indirect effect that would happen, or I like to hope happens when this theoretical thing's invented, right? Is there will be a mass portion of legal officials arguing why they are not biased. And the only way to prove that is to start defending themselves with police statements and arrest records. Boom, we pull those in. Gives us an even stronger analysis of data.
Maybe changing some of the charge codes so that when you get in there, the different scales have different codes and you can do a more meaningful comparison of the...
I love that. I love that.
Back to me the feedback, we're like, well, this is different because of the extreme. All right, we're going to make new charge codes so that the categories align better.
Beautiful. Yeah, the whole coming together of the community, I didn't even think of that. I don't know who had their hand first.
You're going to be pulling in public data, and of course it's probably going to be some anonymization happening to it, but people who have been convicted of these said crimes might be pressured to or want to opt out for whatever reason due to some threats of, hey, next time you're in front of that judge is going to know and there's going to be some problems for you. So how do you incorporate opting out and making sure that people aren't used as threats?
That's a very good question, right? The sad reality and answer to that is, if it's public, it's public, right? If you got a good case as to why something should not be displayed as part of this algorithm or as part of this site that is projecting that statistical analysis, then the company who made this should have a way for you to, and the whole point of this is to have a way for you to challenge the data, right? And if you're like, hey, listen, A, B, and C has happened. Every time I bring up this or someone's brought up this to this judge, he doesn't care that he's been identified as corrupt and unjust. He hounds them anyway. All right, let's take your stuff out. Let's keep it hidden until after your sentencing or until after you've gotten your charge or until after you've been released, and then let's talk about putting it back, right? The whole point of this isn't data by any means possible, right? Because we're trying to stop pain in the community, so we don't want to indirectly bring pain to a specific individual. Because like I said here, every number isn't just a number, it's a person.
I love the idea of this. One of the questions I have is, obviously bias begins far before they get to the judge. We can talk all about the school to prison pipeline with that, but specifically when we get down to the police level, do you see this being extrapolated out in the future towards individual police officers? Acknowledging, of course, not all of that data is public at the moment, but in the same way that body cams also weren't an option, do you see this growing into something that you can individually look at each officer's arrest records, who they've let off with warnings, who they actually ended up taking into custody, and having that information available?
So that would be nice. I'll tell you, law enforcement isn't quick to give up their data. Nor the people who have filed grievances against them. They are very slow to give that up. But yes, that would be great. And you know, like you said, the bias does start much before you get to the court system. Now, a really cool thing that a buddy of mine, a researcher and AI and cybersecurity just did was he found out that through the modification and the ingestion of the map data displayed on Facebook, that you can use the individual tags and information to pull every single picture, even if it was posted on a private profile, including stuff from cops' dash cams, directly into your feed. So maybe we do that, but you know, then you'll get yelled at by a bunch of people. And then also to your point, yeah, like this stuff starts very early. Sunflower, Mississippi still has segregation. You know, like this stuff and this bias does start very early.
Just a comment. I mean, as we start to look at using AI to start to pull this information forward, the information forward, it's more of a comment. I'm just saying that as we start to look at AI and as we start to look at creating systems that make otherwise data that's very hard currently to consume, very hard to structure. As we start to look at it for good purposes like this, we always need to keep in mind what is the secondary purpose of this data, and so who is the owner of the data, and what guarantees do we have that they're going to be using it for the correct purposes? Because once this data becomes more consumable and more accessible, what is, you know, and before it starts to push change for justice and things of that nature, which would be the intended purpose, a secondary purpose could potentially be used for creating further injustices. For example, social credit scores. For example, use of this data to either, you know, some people should get business loans and some people shouldn't. Some people should get right, mortgages and some people shouldn't, and that's going to be based upon basically accessible data that was generated because of injustice and could potentially be used for secondary purposes that would not be consistent.
And I love that you brought that up, because that, funny enough, is one of the main reasons that this is theoretical. One of the biggest things that I have a problem with while I was designing this is the indirect implications. If I show the public that this is possible, then what's stopping them from using said system to generate a public, not enforced, social credit score? Doesn't matter if it's not enforced. People will use something that's publicly available. People will use something that's not part or forced into the legal framework.
But didn't you say this data is already publicly available?
Correct. But the main worry is this is publicly available. This is doable, completely integratable. But when you show people that ingesting public data can be good for statistical analysis, especially when displayed properly, what stops them from making something similar but for negative consequences? Like, for example, the whole AI race, right? Everybody wants to be the first to the singularity because being the first to the singularity gives you dominant power of the world. They can't control it. They can't contain it. They can't stop it. And that is one of the things that kind of hinders the release of this product. Because once again, the point is to help, not hurt, either directly or indirectly. Any other questions?
I guess one thing I'm thinking about is, I think on a similar note, I wonder if, my fairness score is so high I can't be racist. It's just a new, I've got a ton of black friends.
But at least, now they're forcefully fair, so.
Right. But I wonder what could we do in combination with this in order to continue spreading information about how, racism isn't just necessarily the individual racist acts. It's about this whole culture of kind of white supremacy and inbred things that are built into the system. I guess how do you see messaging going along with this to keep eyes on the kind of fundamental sociological answers here and not just the raw stats?
Yeah, so funny enough, there's actually another talk that I have. If you go to that QR, there's an abstract, it's not the full talk. But what happens is you have to integrate multiple products that identify database biases, right? And one of the big ones and one of the first steps is having and taking control over your political and legal system. There's a talk in there about using a theoretical AI creation to restructure the way that we conduct debates for all levels of election systems that gives full control to the public, right? It takes all those unique things, not just the statistical bias, but something that gives the public a voice, something that takes out bias here, something that identifies this here, right? It takes a multitude of tools, and as said in there, it takes a community. And you're not going to rid this on the first step, just like Martin Luther King didn't rid racial issues right after he had his speech. It takes time, it takes community, and it takes coming together.
I guess what you basically would create an algorithm like this is kind of a Turing test, because all the legal stuff relies basically on words, on document. For example, there are things that really pisses me off, and I can express this without saying it in documents. And I guess this is pretty, in German law, it's pretty common to express stuff without saying it. But a judge or the other party, they would understand it. So this is, I guess, one of a very, very difficult thing the algorithm has to do or has to deal with.
100%, and even on this side, right, you have what I like to call implicit hidden bias, right? So legally over here, you cannot deny somebody a job based on their protected group, right? So I'm in a protected group. I am a 100% disabled veteran, right? Marine Corps was very nice to me. But no one can deny me a job for that. But what they will do when they find out is say, oh, we just got a lot of applications and you didn't meet the cut. But you can never go on the back end and pull every application to see if that was true or not. So Yeah, that's not something that this would handle. That's along those lines of we have to make multiple systems that come together, just like historically our racial leaders that have pushed for change came together in multitude. And
But it has a bit of a 1984 touch.
yeah, that's a great analysis, great comparison. Any other questions?
I'm so sorry. I don't know if you covered this, but there's a lot of in the election process. They're all happening at different times, different places, different ways, etc. And a lot of the down ballot races are critical, like for attorney general or state secretary, or who's running, who's going to be your next sheriff. And a lot of people have some terrible track records. It'd be really great to pinpoint those people who's trying to run again, and then try to take them out, so to speak. Just
Or at least give the public enough data to decide.
yeah, so that they can see it with enough notice to get enough people there to vote against them, or get another candidate in that's way more friendly to different communities.
Yeah, and that was, so I didn't speak on that, but the beginning analysis of this talk is the fact that data manipulation for personal gain, we all know in the IT and cyber community, is a marker for exploitation. We all know that social engineering is a non-computer based but still threat to the IT and cyber community, right? This is data manipulation from the legal side. Hey, I'm running for this office and I've never done A, B, and C, and all of this stuff is untrue, and I support X community. Data manipulation for personal gain. Actually, you don't. You sentence 90% of X community to XYZ, and you were super friendly to this random community, right? Not true, sir or ma'am. That's one of the things this aims to do. And on top of that, there's another talk, I won't go into detail, it's another abstract on there that you can read on the QR. Another way to adjust that or address that is making some said system that one takes over as the debater. We're not there yet for super realistic, perfect down to the T, virtual speaking bots, but we're pretty close, right? And when we get close enough, not only can you have this as your moderator, but you can have a public forum where all of the questions of the public are ingested. Then it's all filtered out as much as you can to make sure that there aren't any malicious or biased or heavily segregated racial questions like, when are you going to kick out all Hispanic people from the U.S.? Not a question we need asked, right? And then this AI, this ML front end ingests all of that, and then it chooses based on the statistical analysis of the questions asked from each disparity in each group. Well, this is what the public actually wants to hear, and let me ask that during the debates. It's non-biased, it puts the power in the public's hand, and it allows them to actually have control over the debate process, right? That's another talk, but no, I completely agree with you. And the legal systems around the world it's really sad. Not just the US, but almost everywhere you go. This is one drop in the bucket of a 5-gallon bucket that we're hoping that over time we can fill. Any other questions?
I would be curious if, after you have your perfect system and it does the analysis, if you'd be able to do a retrospective in some of the cases that were found to be a little heavier or biased, certain types of language that was used, certain types of skill or rule, if you could start to identify what may have triggered that, for maybe more subtle. Some of them might be a bit more obvious.
I like that. Let's add it to the equation list, man. I love it. Yes, that would be great.
That might be hard, but it's, like I said, I'm implementing it in my head.
In the famous words of Martin Luther King, we will overcome, right? We'll get there someday.
Don't think he was talking about algorithmic complexity, but
no, definitely not.
But
you gotta drop something in there, right? I have some other cool MLK quotes up there too. But any other quotes, questions, thoughts, concerns?
How's that led to cybersecurity
introducing our speaker.
This was my TED Talk. Thank you all for coming. Hope you have a great day. Oh, yeah.